The morning fog still hung over the streets of Pacific Palisades as Detective Sarah Martinez parked her car in front of the imposing estate on Sycamore Lane. It was one of those March mornings in Los Angeles when the city hovers between winter and spring, indecisive and moody. The neighborhood exuded affluence from every pore: neatly trimmed hedges, immaculate facades, luxury cars in the driveways. This was where people who had made it, who sat at the top of the social pyramid, lived. The house in front of her was an architectural masterpiece of glass and concrete, modern and cool, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Detective Martinez had seen many houses in her 15 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, but this one exuded a special kind of perfection that always made her feel uneasy. Too perfect, too controlled, as if something dark lurked behind the immaculate facade. She got out of her car and was immediately greeted by a uniformed colleague. Officer Rodriguez looked tired, the night shift written all over his face. "Detective," he greeted her curtly, "forensics is already on site. The husband is waiting in the living room. He hasn't made a statement yet, insists on speaking only with you." Martinez nodded and followed him through the neatly manicured front yard. The front door was open, and behind it she could hear voices, the clicking of cameras, and a bustle of activity. But first, she was interested in the man sitting in the living room waiting for her. Robert Hartman was in his mid-50s, but he looked like someone who had bought his youth through expensive treatments and rigorous exercise. Grey temples lent him dignity, a face with hard features that radiated power and control. He wore a perfectly fitting suit, even though it was only a little after 7 in the morning. His hands rested calmly on his knees, too calm for a man whose wife had died a few hours earlier. "Mr. Hartman," Martinez began, sitting down across from him, "my sincere condolences. I know this is a terrible time for you, but I need to ask you a few questions." Robert Hartman looked at her, and there was something in his eyes that Martinez couldn't quite place. Grief? Anger? Or was it relief? "She wasn't here," he said firmly. "My wife wasn't in our house when it happened. She was in that apartment in Venice Beach. With him." Martinez took notes. "With whom exactly, Mr. Hartman?" "With that Indian guy. That Arjun." The word came out of his mouth like poison. "A nobody. An employee at the hospital where my wife works." "Worked." He corrected himself, but his voice remained firm, almost mechanical. The story Robert Hartman told over the next 2 hours was one of betrayal, deception, and shattered trust. His wife, Dr. Katerina Hartman, had been one of the most renowned neurosurgeons in the city. At 31, she was already chief physician in the neurology department at St. Vincent Medical Center, published in the most important medical journals, celebrated for her groundbreaking surgical techniques. "We got married 4 years ago," Robert said. His voice sounded different now, more fragile. "I had just come out of my first marriage. Katerina was young, brilliant, full of life. She made me smile again, you know. After all the pain of my divorce, she was like a light." Martinez watched him closely. She had learned that the first few hours after a death were the most revealing. People in shock often said things they would later regret. "When did you start to suspect your wife?" she asked directly. Robert hesitated. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "In January. It was little things at first. She came home late, was distracted, always on the phone. I thought it was work. The hospital is demanding, I know that. But then..." He stood up and walked to the window, his back to her. "Then I found hotel bills, restaurants we'd never been to, debits for an apartment I knew nothing about." "And what did you do?" "I hired a private investigator." The words came faster now, as if he had been waiting to finally say them. "Thomas Brennan, one of the best in town." "And what he found out?" Robert turned around. And now Martinez saw the anger in his eyes, the raw, unfiltered anger of a betrayed man. She'd been having an affair for months with this Indian guy, a lowly administrative assistant, 5 years younger than her. He worked in her department, reported directly to her. It wasn't just immoral, detective. It was a violation of every ethical guideline the hospital had. Martinez took more notes. When did you confront your wife about it? 3 days ago, on a Sunday. I showed her the photos, the evidence. She didn't even try to deny it. His voice turned bitter. She said she finally felt seen, as if I hadn't done everything for her for the last 4 years, given her every opportunity to build her career. How did she react? She wanted time to think, to find a solution. I gave her an ultimatum. Either she ends this disgrace immediately, or I file for divorce, with all the consequences. Robert sat down again, suddenly exhausted. I gave her 24 hours, and she went to him. The night she died, she went to him. The words hung heavy in the room. Martinez felt the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together, but the picture that was emerging was still blurred. Mr. Hartman, where were you last night between 6 and 10 p.m.? He looked directly at her. Here. I was here all night, alone. I was waiting for her, hoping she would come to her senses and come home. A pause. But she didn't. Martinez stood up. We'll have more questions. Please stay in town. She left the living room and stepped out into the garden, where the morning sun was now breaking through the fog. Her colleague, Detective James Park, came toward her, a tablet in his hand. Sarah, you have to see this, he said, handing her the device. There were photos on the screen, surveillance photos. A woman and a young man entering an apartment building in Venice Beach. Other pictures showed them in restaurants on the beach, embracing. That's her, Park said, Dr. Katerina Hartman. And this is Arjun Mehta, 26 years old, administrative assistant at St. Vincent Medical Center. These photos are from the last 3 months. Martinez scrolled through the pictures. The woman in the photos looked happy, relaxed, completely different from the perfect wife smiling in the framed wedding photos in the house. Here she was real, alive, in love. What happened in Venice Beach? She asked. Park sighed. Neighbors heard loud voices coming from the apartment around 8:30 p.m. Shortly after, a scream, then silence. At 9:01 p.m., the emergency call came in. The caller was Arjun Mehta himself. When the paramedics arrived, Dr. Hartman was already dead, bleeding out, a deep cut to her femoral artery. She was lying on the living room floor, surrounded by broken glass. And Arjun Mehta? He's at the station. He claims it was an accident. They had been arguing. She fell and landed on a glass coffee table. The glass cut her. He tried to stop the bleeding, but... Park shook his head. It happened too fast. Martinez stared at the tablet, at the face of the dead woman who was still alive in these recordings, still laughing. What had made her risk everything? Her career, her marriage, her life. I need to talk to him, she said, to Arjun Mehta, and I want all the reports from the crime scene, every detail. As she walked back to her car, Martinez thought about Robert Hartman's words. He had said his wife had finally felt seen. What did that mean? In her marriage, she had obviously had everything: wealth, status, an influential husband. And yet she had risked it all for a young administrative assistant. The drive to the station took 40 minutes. Martinez used the time to look at the files Park had sent her digitally. Dr. Katerina Hartman had not been an ordinary woman. She had completed her specialist training at the age of 30 and reached the position of chief physician at 31. Her publications were cited internationally. She had received a scholarship to Johns Hopkins University before coming to Los Angeles, and then, at 27, She had met Robert Hartman. He had been 48 at the time, a successful corporate lawyer, recently divorced from his first wife. The wedding had been mentioned in the society pages of the Los Angeles Times, the established lawyer and the brilliant young doctor. But what had gone wrong? Arjun Mehta sat in the interrogation room and did not look like a murderer. He was slim, of medium height, with dark eyes rimmed red from crying. His clothes were stained with dried blood. He had refused to change them, saying only that it was her blood, Katerina's blood, and he couldn't just wash it off. Martinez sat down across from him and turned on the recording device. "Mr. Mehta, I'm Detective Martinez. I need to talk to you about last night's events." Arjun looked at her, and there was pure despair in his eyes. "It was an accident," he whispered hoarsely. "You have to believe me. I loved her. I would never have hurt her. Never." "Tell me what happened," Martinez said calmly. "From the beginning." And so Arjun Mehta began to speak, his voice faltering, interrupted again and again by tears. He told of their first encounter in January, during a mass accident on the freeway, when the hospital was in emergency mode and all available personnel had been mobilized. He told how they had talked in the cafeteria at 4 a.m, exhausted from hours of work, and how, for the first time in his life, he felt truly understood. "She wasn't like the others," he said, his voice softening at the memory. "She didn't look at me and just see an Indian. She saw me, Arjun, the person. We talked about music, literature, our families. She told me what it's like to work as a woman in a male-dominated field. I told her what it's like to be thousands of miles away from home, living between two worlds." Martinez listened and took notes. His story sounded sincere, but she had encountered many sincere-sounding liars before. "When did your conversations become more?" she asked. Arjun closed his eyes. "In March. We met outside the hospital for lunch at first, then for dinner. And then," he opened his eyes again, "then we kissed. I know it was wrong. She was married, she was my boss, but I couldn't help myself. Neither could she." "You rented an apartment in Venice Beach," Martinez noted. "Yes. We needed a place where we could be ourselves, where no one knew us, where we weren't the chief physician and the administrative assistant, just Katerina and Arjun." His voice broke. "It was our refuge. And last night? What happened last night?" Arjun took a deep breath, as if to gather his courage. "Her husband found out everything. He confronted her with evidence, threatened to have me deported, threatened to ruin us both. Katerina decided that we couldn't see each other anymore. She wanted to save her career, protect my future. She came to the apartment yesterday for the last time to end it." "But you didn't want it to end." "No," he admitted. "I wanted to fight. I wanted us to find a solution together. But she had already made up her mind. She said it was impossible. Her husband was too powerful, the consequences too great." Tears ran down his face. "We argued. I begged her to stay, to fight, not to give up. She got angry, said I didn't understand what was at stake. She wanted to leave. I tried to stop her, not physically, just... I touched her arm, wanted to ask her to stay. She broke free, stumbled back, fell against the coffee table. His hands were shaking now. The glass exploded, shards everywhere. She was lying there, and there was so much blood, so much blood. I tried to press on the wound, called 911, screamed for them to send help. But her heart, every beat, pumped more blood out. She looked at me, and her eyes told me she knew that it was too late." The silence in the room was oppressive. Martinez looked at Arjun and tried to discern the truth. Was he a murderer, telling a convincing story, or a desperate man who had lost the woman he loved in a tragic accident? "Her last words," Arjun said suddenly, his voice little more than a whisper. "Her last words were, 'I'm sorry. Not for me, for everything, for the lies, for the pain, for the broken lives.' And then she was gone. Martinez turned off the recording device. She had heard enough for the moment. Forensics would have to confirm whether his version matched the evidence. But one thing was clear: this was not a simple case. It was a tragedy born of passion, control, and desperate decisions. As she left the interrogation room, Detective Park was waiting for her in the hallway. "The results from the crime scene are in," he said. "Blood spatter patterns are consistent with his report. No signs of a struggle except for the broken table. Her injury was severe, the artery severed. Even if the paramedics had been there immediately, they probably couldn't have saved her." Martinez nodded slowly. "And the hospital? What are they saying?" "I spoke to the director of personnel. They had already received an anonymous complaint about the relationship 2 days ago, with photos. The ethics committee had launched an investigation. Both Dr. Hartman and Arjun Mehta were under observation." "Who filed the complaint?" Park hesitated. "It's not officially confirmed, but the email came from a disposable account. The IT department is tracing it back, but—" He looked at Martinez. "There are rumors that Robert Hartman has connections to the hospital board, large donations, personal relationships." Martinez understood. Robert Hartman hadn't just confronted his wife, he had threatened her entire existence, her career, her integrity. He had backed her into a corner from which there was no escape. "We need to dig deeper," she said, "into Robert Hartman's finances, his connections, his movements in the last few days. And we need to find out more about the marriage. What was really going on between him and Katerina?" As Martinez drove home that evening, she couldn't get the image out of her head. A brilliant woman, dead on a living room floor, surrounded by broken glass and blood. A young man who loved her, who might now spend his life in prison. And a husband standing in the shadows, his hands clean, but whose role in this tragedy was not yet fully understood. The perfect facade of Pacific Palisades had cracked, and behind it lay a story of love, betrayal, and deadly consequences that was only now slowly coming to light. The smell of disinfectant and coffee mingled in the cafeteria of St. Vincent Medical Center. It was shortly after 4 in the morning, and the neon lights cast a cold, sterile light on the few people who were still awake. Katerina Hartman sat alone at a table in the corner, a cup of black coffee in front of her, staring into space. 16 hours of surgery were behind her, 3 traumatic brain injuries from a serious traffic accident on Interstate 405. 2 patients would survive. 1 was still in intensive care, his fate uncertain. Her hands, which had worked for hours with microscopic precision, were now trembling slightly from exhaustion and adrenaline. She heard footsteps and looked up. A young man was approaching her table, also with a coffee cup in his hand. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his tie long since discarded. "Excuse me," he said with a slight accent that betrayed his origins. "I didn't mean to disturb you, but you're Dr. Hartman, right? From neurology?" Katerina nodded wearily. "And you are?" "Arjun Mehta. I work in the administration of your department. We haven't met in person yet, but I coordinated the resources for the emergency surgeries tonight." He hesitated. "I just wanted to say, what you did today was extraordinary. The way you led the team, the way you set priorities, you saved lives." Katerina was surprised. In her world, such recognition was rarely expressed, especially not by someone from administration. "Thank you," she said, pointing to the chair opposite her. "Sit down. No one should be alone after a night like this." Arjun smiled and sat down. "You're right. I haven't been here long, only since October. Nights like this, they're new to me too." "From India?" Katerina asked, more to break the silence than out of genuine interest. "Mumbai. I did my master's in healthcare administration at UCLA. This is my first real position in an American hospital." He took a sip of coffee. "And you?" Are you from here? Katharina shook her head. Originally from Hamburg, I studied medicine in Heidelberg, then Johns Hopkins for my training as a neurosurgeon. Los Angeles was an opportunity I couldn't turn down. They talked for over an hour, about the challenges of working in a foreign country, about cultural differences, about the expectations weighing on them. Arjun talked about his family in Mumbai, about a father who worked as an accountant, about a mother who constantly asked when he would finally get married. Katharina told him about her own family, about parents who were disappointed that she had gone so far away. What she didn't tell him was how lonely she felt in her marriage, how Robert paraded her around at dinner parties like a trophy, my brilliant wife, the neurosurgeon, but ignored her opinion when it didn't fit his worldview. How he celebrated her successes as long as they didn't overshadow him. As the sun rose and the cafeteria slowly filled up, they said goodbye. But something had changed. That night, two people who lived in completely different worlds had felt a connection that went beyond politeness. The weeks that followed were marked by chance encounters, a greeting in the hallway, a brief exchange when handing over patient files. Arjun always seemed to be there when administrative problems arose, solving them efficiently and with a smile. Katharina began to look out for him, looking forward to these moments. In February, they met outside the hospital for the first time. They had lunch at a small Vietnamese restaurant nearby where the chances of running into colleagues were slim. They talked about literature, both loved Gabriel Garcia Marquez, about music, about their dreams and fears. Sometimes I feel like an imposter, Katharina confessed that day, as if I were just playing a role, the successful doctor, the perfect wife, the competent chief physician. But who am I really? I've forgotten. Arjun looked at her with an understanding she hadn't felt in years. I understand that. In Mumbai, I was supposed to be the obedient son. Here, I'm supposed to be the hard-working immigrant who is grateful for every opportunity. But what I really want, what I really feel, no one seems to care about that. I care, Katharina said quietly, and at that moment they both knew they had crossed a line. The first kiss came 3 weeks later, at the end of February, in the restaurant parking lot. It was late, it was raining, and they were standing under a canopy, neither of them wanting to leave. Arjun had told her about a poem his grandmother had read to him as a child, about two souls who search for and find each other across 1,000 lifetimes. Do you believe in something like that? He had asked. In fate? In connections that are stronger than reason? Katharina hadn't answered. Instead, she leaned toward him and kissed him. Gently at first, then with a desperation that surprised even her. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. This is wrong, she whispered. I'm married. You work for me. This is wrong in every way. I know, Arjun replied, but it feels more right than anything I've ever experienced. The apartment in Venice Beach had been Arjun's idea, a small studio apartment not far from the beach, with large windows and the sound of waves in the background. He had paid for it out of his own pocket, not wanting Katharina to take any financial risks. This is our place, he said, when he gave her the key for the first time. There's no Robert here, no hospital administration, no expectations, just us. And for a few months, it was paradise. They met 3, sometimes 4 times a week. Katharina invented overtime, emergencies, conferences. The lies came out of her mouth with frightening ease. In the apartment, they cooked together, listened to music, talked about everything and nothing. Arjun read her poems, first in Hindi, then he translated them into English. Katharina told him about operations, about the small miracles and great tragedies of her profession. But reality could not be shut out forever. In May, Robert began to ask questions. Where did the hotel bill come from? Why so much overtime? Katharina felt the noose tightening around her neck, but she couldn't stop. Every hour with Arjun felt like breathing after a long dive. What she didn't know was that Robert had already started having her watched. Private investigator Thomas Brennan had been following her for weeks, photographing every encounter, documenting every meeting. The evidence was piling up, accurate and relentless. When Katerina came home that Sunday morning in June after a pretend jog, Robert was sitting at the kitchen table. In front of him was a folder, and in that folder was the end of her world as she knew it. "Sit down, Katerina," he said in an ice-cold voice. "We need to talk." The folder lay between them like a bomb waiting to explode. Katerina looked at it, then at Robert, whose face was a mask of coldness and anger. Her sports clothes clung to her body, not from the sweat of jogging, but from the sudden panic that gripped her. "Open it," Robert said, his voice frighteningly calm. With trembling hands, Katerina opened the folder. The first photo hit her like a blow. It was her and Arjun entering the apartment building in Venice Beach. His arm was protectively around her shoulders. She was laughing. The date, April 15th. She leafed through more photos. A restaurant in Santa Monica, a walk on the beach at sunset, a kiss in the parking lot. Each picture was dated, time-stamped, precisely documented like a medical record. "Since when?" she asked tonelessly. "Since May. I had my suspicions, so I sought certainty." Robert stood up and went to the window. 3 months, Katerina. For 3 months I had to watch my wife fool around with a lowly employee. The word hit her harder than the photos. "It's not like that," she began, but her voice failed her. Robert turned around, and now she saw the unfiltered anger in his eyes. "Not like that. Then what is it? Love?" He laughed bitterly. "You love a 26-year-old Indian guy who earns just enough to afford his shabby shared apartment in Culver City? A nobody?" "He's not a nobody," Katerina said, and there was a strength in her voice that surprised even her. "He sees me. He understands me. Something you haven't done in years." "I see you." Robert's voice grew louder. "I gave you everything. This house, your status in society, connections that advanced your career. And this is how you thank me." "I'm not a possession, Robert. I'm a human being." A human being who broke her marriage, who violated every ethical guideline by having an affair with a subordinate. He picked up another document on the table. "Do you know what this is?" "A copy of the email that will be sent to the Ethics Committee at St. Vincent Medical Center tomorrow. With all the photos, all the evidence." Katerina's heart skipped a beat. "You wouldn't—" "Oh, I would, and I will, unless—" He paused, savoring her fear. "Unless you end this charade immediately. You never see him again. He gets transferred or finds a new job, and we start couples therapy. And if not, then I'll file for divorce, publicly, with all this evidence. Your reputation will be destroyed. The hospital will have to fire you, if only because of the ethical violations. And your little friend," Robert smiled coldly. "His visa is tied to his job. No job, no residence permit. He'll be deported, back to India, to his family, who will then find out about his dirty affair with a married woman." Katerina felt the air leave her lungs. Robert had planned every move, thought through every consequence. He had cornered her, leaving her with no way out. "You give me 24 hours, Robert said. "By this time tomorrow, I want to hear your decision. Either you end it and we save what can be saved, or I destroy you both." He walked to the door, turned around once more. "By the way, I slept in the guest room tonight. I can't stand lying next to you anymore." When the door closed behind him, Katerina collapsed. The photos lay scattered around her, silent witnesses to her betrayal and despair. She reached for her cell phone, her hands shaking so badly that she dialed the wrong number twice before reaching Arjun. "Katerina, what's wrong?" His voice sounded concerned. "He knows. Robert knows everything." The words came out between sobs. He has photos, evidence. He's threatening to destroy us both. I'll come to you right away. No, you can't come here. We have to meet tonight at the apartment. Katerina, what did he say? What does he want? That I never see you again, that you get transferred or quit. Otherwise, she couldn't go on. Otherwise what? Otherwise we'll both lose everything. Our jobs, our future. He'll have you deported, Arjun. He'll make sure your family finds out everything. The silence on the other end was oppressive. And what do you want to do? Arjun finally asked in a broken voice. I don't know. I have to think. But we have to talk. Tonight. Please. I'll be there. At 8? At 8. The day passed like a nightmare. Katerina called the hospital and reported sick, something she hadn't done once in 4 years. She sat in her study, staring at the photos Robert had left behind, trying to find a way out. But with every passing hour, it became clearer that there was none. She loved Arjun. There was no doubt about that. In the last few months, she had felt truly alive for the first time in years. But could she give up everything for it? Her career, which she had worked so hard to build, her reputation. And could she do that to Arjun, destroy his future, bring shame on his family? Around 7 in the evening, she drove to Venice Beach. The sun was just setting, bathing the sky in shades of red and orange. The apartment that had once been her refuge now felt like a cage. Arjun arrived punctually at 8. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed. They fell into each other's arms, holding each other tight as if they could keep the outside world at bay. We need to talk, Katerina finally said, pulling away from him. I know. Arjun sat down on the couch. Katerina, I understand if you decide to pursue your career. I would never ask that of you. That's not the question, she interrupted him. The question is whether we can find a way to be together without Robert destroying us. Is there such a way? Katerina shook her head. I've been thinking about it all day. Robert holds all the cards. He has the evidence. He has the connections. He has the power. If we continue, we'll both lose everything. And if we stop? Arjun's voice was little more than a whisper. Then what? You go back to him, pretend nothing happened. And me, I'm supposed to just pretend I never knew you. I don't know, Arjun. All I know is that I don't want you to be deported because of me. I don't want your family to suffer. I couldn't bear that. But you want me to just let you go? To watch you return to a man who controls you, who treats you like a trophy? The words hit their mark. Katerina felt tears running down her cheeks. What am I supposed to do? Tell me what other option there is. Arjun stood up and began pacing the room. We could run away, go somewhere else, start over. With what money? And where? Robert would find us. He would never stop. Then we'll fight. We'll go public, tell our side of the story, and destroy ourselves in the process. Katerina shook her head. Arjun, I'm a doctor. My reputation is everything. If this comes to light with all the details, my career is over, and yours too. The truth hung heavily between them. They were caught in a web that Robert had spun with precision. Every way out led to disaster. I love you, Arjun said suddenly, his voice breaking. You need to know that. Whatever you decide, I love you. Katerina went to him and placed her hands on his face. I love you too. But sometimes love isn't enough. Don't say that. Please, don't say that. Arjun, we have to be realistic. Realistic? His voice grew louder. The realistic thing is for you to give up, for you to go back to him, to your perfect life, to your perfect house. And me, I was just a distraction, an adventure. That's not true. Then prove it. Fight for us. The discussion escalated. Months of suppression, secrets and fear burst forth. Arjun accused her of never really loving him, of just using him to escape her unhappy marriage. Katerina accused him of not wanting to see reality, of being naive about the consequences. "You don't understand what's at stake," she shouted. "I understand that you're a coward," he shouted back. Katerina froze. Then she grabbed her bag. "I'm leaving. This was a mistake." "Katerina, wait." "No. It's over, Arjun. It has to be over." She walked to the door, but Arjun stood in her way, not threateningly but desperately. "Please, don't go like this. Not like this. Let's talk about it. There's nothing left to talk about." She tried to walk past him, but he held her arm tight. "Katerina, please." She broke free, stumbled backward, lost her balance. Her body crashed into the glass coffee table. The sound of shattering glass filled the room. Then silence. Then pain. Katerina lay on the floor, surrounded by shards of glass. And then she saw the blood. Arjun stood frozen. Then he saw the blood spreading dark red across the light-colored carpet. "Katerina!" He rushed to her, kneeling down beside her. She lay on her side, surrounded by shards of glass. Her eyes were wide open, her face ashen. "It hurts," she whispered. "My leg." A large shard of glass had pierced deep into her thigh. With every second, more blood pulsed out, rhythmically, mercilessly. Arjun tore open his shirt and pressed the fabric against the wound. "Hang in there, Katerina. I'll call for help." With blood-smeared fingers, he dialed 911. "My girlfriend. She's bleeding heavily. Shard of glass, thigh, the artery." He gave the address, his voice breaking several times. The voice on the other end remained calm. "Keep pressure on. Don't move. Ambulance is on its way." "They're coming. Hang in there." Arjun looked into her eyes, but the blood kept coming, soaking everything. "Arjun," her voice was weak, "I'm sorry for everything. Save your strength. The paramedics will be here soon. I loved you. I really loved you." A tear ran down her cheek. Arjun pressed desperately on the wound, but the blood seeped through his fingers. Her face grew paler, her breathing shallower. "Please, don't go. Please." Katerina's eyes fluttered. "Tell my family. It wasn't his fault." "Katerina! Katerina!" Her eyes glazed over. Her body went limp. Her heart stopped beating. "No!" Arjun's cry echoed through the apartment. He tried chest compressions, pressing down on her chest, counting mechanically. But it was too late. She had lost too much blood. The paramedics found him bent over her, whispering, "Please, come back." They worked, administering oxygen, compressions. But their looks said it all. Time? 21:40. Dr. Katharina Hartmann, 31 years old, was dead. Arjun sank to the floor and cried. For the woman he had loved. For the future they would never have. The police arrived. Detective Martinez asked questions. Yes, they had argued. Yes, he had held her arm. Yes, she had fallen. As they led him away, he turned around. Katerina lay there, covered with a white sheet. She would never wake up again. Detective Martinez sat in her office, staring at the investigation file. 3 days had passed since Katerina's death, and the deeper she dug, the more complex the picture became. The forensic reports were clear. The blood spatter patterns matched Arjun's statement. No signs of a struggle, except for the broken table. The wound was fatal, but consistent with a fall. The emergency call recording showed Arjun's genuine distress. Technically, it was an accident, but Martinez's instincts told her that the whole story had not yet been told. She summoned Robert Hartmann again, this time to an official interrogation room. "Mr. Hartmann, you said you were home all night, alone." Martinez placed a document in front of him. "But your cell phone location data shows that you were near Venice Beach at 8:15 p.m., only 3 blocks from the apartment." Robert's face froze. I wanted to see if she was really going there. I didn't go inside." You followed her. I had a right to know. Did you see or speak to your wife that evening? No. I left after 10 minutes. His voice became defensive. What are you implying here, Detective? Martinez leaned back. We also traced the emails to the hospital's ethics committee. They came from a disposable account, but the IP address leads to a cafe you frequent. That proves nothing. It proves that you systematically worked to destroy her life. The surveillance, the threats, the anonymous report. Martinez's voice hardened. You pushed your wife into a corner. She cheated on me, Robert exploded. She betrayed our marriage. And for that, she had to die. The words hung heavy in the room. Robert breathed heavily, his hands clenched into fists. I didn't kill her. It was that Indian guy. Martinez studied him. No, you didn't pull the trigger, but you loaded the gun. You pushed her to the edge until there was no way out. That's absurd. I wanted to save my marriage. Did you really, or did you want to maintain control? Martinez pulled out more documents. We spoke to Katerina's colleagues, to her friends. A picture is emerging, Mr. Hartman, of a woman who felt trapped in her own marriage, of a man who treated her like a trophy. A colleague said Katerina told her she felt like a bird in a golden cage, beautiful to look at, but without freedom. Robert was silent, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. Martinez closed the file. Arjun Mehta will be charged with manslaughter. But you, Mr. Hartman, you will have to live with the guilt that your control, your pride, your revenge contributed to the death of a brilliant woman. Am I under arrest? No. You haven't broken any laws. Not technically. Martinez stood up. But morally, you are just as guilty as he is. After Robert left, Martinez sat in silence for a long time. That was the hardest part of her job, knowing that justice and the law were not always the same thing. She thought of Katerina, caught between two men, both possessive in their own way. She thought of Arjun, whose love had turned to despair. And she thought of Robert, sitting in his perfect house, without handcuffs, but with blood on his hands that no judge would ever see. The next day, she visited Arjun in prison. He looked broken, a shadow of his former self. I didn't want this to happen, he whispered. I just wanted her to stay, for us to fight. I never wanted to hurt her. I know, Martinez said quietly, but she's still dead. What's going to happen to me? The prosecutor will plead manslaughter. With your testimony, the emergency call, the forensic evidence, probably 3 to 5 years, then deportation. Arjun nodded slowly. And Robert? What will happen to him? Martinez hesitated. Nothing. Legally, he didn't do anything. But he did everything. Arjun's voice was full of bitterness. He cornered her. He destroyed us both. And he walks free. Life isn't always fair, Mr. Mehta. I've learned that. He looked at her, and there was an emptiness in his eyes that said more than words ever could. You know what the worst part is? Not that I'm going to prison. Not even that she's dead. The worst part is knowing that we had a chance, if we had been braver, if we had fought back sooner, if Robert hadn't destroyed us. Martinez had no answer to that. Sometimes there wasn't one. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, onlookers, colleagues from the hospital, everyone wanted to witness the end of this story. Arjun Mehta sat next to his court-appointed lawyer, thin, his eyes empty. Robert Hartman sat on the other side of the courtroom. Perfectly dressed as always, but something had changed. The hardness in his face had deepened, the wrinkles more pronounced. He avoided eye contact with everyone. The judge read out the verdict. Negligent homicide, 4 years in prison, followed by deportation to India. Arjun showed no reaction. He had already lost everything that was important to him. Would you like to say anything, Mr. Mehta? asked the judge. Arjun stood up, his voice quiet but firm. Every day I think of her, of the look in her eyes as life slipped away. I would give anything to undo that moment, not to escape punishment, but because she deserved to live. She was brilliant, kind, captivating. He glanced briefly at Robert. I accept my guilt. But I'm not the only one who's guilty. The words hung heavy in the room. Some glances wandered to Robert, who remained motionless. Later, on the steps of the courthouse, Detective Martinez intercepted Robert. "Can you sleep at night, Mr. Hartman?" He looked at her, and for a moment she saw real pain in his eyes. "Every day I ask myself what would have happened if I had reacted differently, if I had fought to hold her instead of controlling her." His voice broke. "But those questions don't change anything. She's dead, and I have to live with that. Will you? I have no choice." He walked away, a broken man in a perfect suit. Martinez watched him go. Justice was a complicated concept. Arjun would spend years in prison for a moment of desperation. Robert would remain free, but trapped in his own guilt. 3 days later, she visited Katharina's grave. Fresh flowers lay there, from her parents, she learned. They had wanted to forgive both men, but couldn't. She deserved better, Martinez murmured to the gravestone. They all deserved better. The stone read, "Dr. Katharina Hartman, brilliant doctor, beloved daughter, gone too soon." What it didn't say, but should have. Caught between love and control. Died because no one let go in time. Martinez left the cemetery knowing that this case would haunt her. Not because of unanswered questions, but because of the answers that had been found. Sometimes the truth was the most painful thing of all. In his prison cell, Arjun wrote letters to Katharina's parents that he never sent. In his empty house, Robert drank and stared at wedding photos. Both men, in their own way, were trapped in a moment they could never change. And Katharina, she remained a warning, a story about how love, control, and pride can lead to tragedy, how perfect facades hide the darkest secrets. How people who want to be loved sometimes die because no one understands that love means freedom, not possession. The true verdict would not be handed down in a courtroom. It would be lived out in the sleepless nights of two men who had both failed in their own way. One would pay for it. The other would have to live with it. Both were a kind of prison,